Look, back in the day you had two buttons, jump and something else. That something else could change from game to game. Maybe it was hitting something with a cane in DuckTales or shooting aliens in Contra, but one thing that was absolutely always true, one of those buttons jumped in side-scrolling games. Sure, if you're really desperate, you might have to press up to jump or both buttons together, but there always was a jump. Then a game came out that did not have a jump at all. Instead, you had a bionic grappling arm that would serve as your means of platforming. It was utter brilliance. The level designs were so well crafted to take advantage of this mechanic. There were so many ways you could swing around the levels, and not having a jump let Bionic Commando feel like no other game before it. The grappling hook was just awesome. You could grab onto virtually anything. You could use it to pull yourself closer to boxes, to knock enemies off balance, deflect bullets, and grab items. It was just such an unbelievably cool mechanic. There were even these overhead stages that paid homage to the original Commando. In these levels, the grappling hook could be swung around like a shield. It was all just so unbelievably awesome. The level design was fantastic from start to finish. You had a big map to traverse, tons of different ways to use the bionic arm, and you even got to shoot Hitler in the face with a rocket launcher at the end of the game. Bionic Commando is like no game ever made. We see a lot of grappling hooks in games nowadays, and I would argue that this game paved the way for all of them. Lots of Nintendo games switched up the playstyles here and there, but from a gameplay perspective, it just didn't make any sense. Look at like Bio Billy, for example. One minute you're running through the swamp, punching enemies infinitely who just won't die, and the next minute you're shooting everyone. What happened? Where'd the gun come from? Why did he use it on the first level? It just doesn't make any sense. Blaster Master took this concept and made it make sense in a really cool way. You play as a tank, traversing a large world, and it gets bigger as you get more and more upgrades, like the ability to swim and scale walls, but you frequently run into areas that are too small for your gigantic tank to go. By pressing the select button, your character jumps out of the tank and now traverses the land on foot. Here you are tiny, fall damage kills you quickly, but you can climb up and down ladders and enter these little lairs where the game switches to a top-down view. These lairs contain upgrades for your tank and for yourself. You run around shooting grenades, and you have to tackle the game's massive bosses here, which take up the whole screen and are just a wonder to look at. It's such a cool, unique Nintendo game that did so many things well and doesn't feel quite like anything else out there. It was also a victim of a number of really terrible games in the franchises, but luckily all that's been corrected in the modern era with the Blaster Master Zero trilogy. I know at this point we just take for granted the Mega Man formula. There have been so many games in the series, then you throw in all the fan games, ROM hacks, and indie clones, and the Mega Man formula really doesn't scream innovation. But let's go back to 1987, when the original Mega Man released. This game did things differently, and it innovated in so many cool ways. Look, back then, most games were linear. You didn't pick your levels. You just went level 1, 2, 3 until it was over. But in this game, you could choose the order. I remember the first time I booted it up, I was just looking at all these Robot Masters. They all looked so cool. I didn't know which one to start with. Then you start playing. This game was fantastic and difficult. There was nothing unique about that. Plenty of NES games were fantastic and difficult. But eventually, you would have gotten good enough to beat a boss. Then you get to take their powers. I had never seen anything like that. Like a minute ago, Kutzman was throwing scissors at me. Now I get to throw scissors just like he did. It was so unbelievably cool. Then you start experimenting with the weapons, and you'd find that these weapons were strong against certain bosses. Now enemies that seemed impossible before could be taken down in the blink of an eye. It was just such a cool mechanic, and the world had never seen anything like that. Not the way Mega Man did it. The original did not sell well, probably because of the goofy cover art, and while the formula continued to be perfected over the years, the original Mega Man deserves a lot of credit for taking a chance on some really cool ideas. Battletoads is renowned for being one of, if not, the hardest game ever made. I've beaten this game on original hardware, and it deserves that reputation. This game is tough. Most people are familiar with the Turbo Tunnel, and that is where their journey ends. But for those of us who have beat it, we recognize the Turbo Tunnel is actually one of the easiest levels in the game. Believe me, it gets much harder. So while this game is talked about a ton for its difficulty, it rarely gets talked about just how innovative a game this is. During the NES era, developers were willing to try all sorts of new, crazy ideas, and that led to some unbelievable games that still hold up to this day. no game was as crazy as Battletoads. There are 12 levels here. When you start out, it seems like a pretty simple beat 'em up. Then you fight the first level boss, and it switches to this first-person view, kind of like Shredder and Turtles in Time, but that game couldn't come out until a few months after Battletoads. From that point on, this game is anything but a simple beat 'em up. Every level had you doing something new. One minute you're riding down a rope, stealing a bird's beak to smack around other birds with. Then you're in a turbo tunnel, you do some platforming, swimming, you ride different vehicles, and the last level has you scaling a tower and boasts some of the coolest graphical effects on the NES. I don't think there is a game ever created that took the chances the way this game did. Every level is something new and unique. Every level is like its own little minigame. All of them devilishly hard, but insanely fun to try to master. Most people will never see it though, because of the insane difficulty, but for people like me who have braved through this game, it's hard not to be wowed by just how many different things this game does well. Magic of Charizard is definitely the most obscure game on this list. That's not really saying much given how hugely popular the other games I've featured are, but even among hidden gems, this is one of the most obscure gems out there. And that's a shame because not only is this a phenomenal game, but it is so innovative in just so many different ways. Play is split between actions similar to the original Zelda and turn-based battles like Final Fantasy. This fusion is something I can't recall seeing in any game, and both are just done so well. The action segments have you pick between 3 different classes, each with their own abilities. Seems pretty standard now, but it's not something you saw of a ton at the time. The turn-based battle introduced all sorts of cool things. You had a variety of characters that traveled with you, and you got to pick the ones you brought into battle. Each of them have their own unique abilities, but different combinations of companions would also let you use team attacks. These were devastating moves, and they were so much fun to explore which combinations of characters would trigger different team attacks. If you needed extra help, you could also hire mercenaries to aid you in battle, which is something you never saw in games back then. You had all sorts of different magic spells, many of which had dramatic effects on the environment. Use the freeze spell over water to create a bridge, or the rain spell in the desert to make it so you can cross. This was such a cool gameplay mechanic that was so way ahead of its time. It even made time traveling a mechanic 8 years before Chrono Trigger ever saw the light of day. There were so many different ways you could interact with this mechanic. So for example, you could plant the seed in the past, and in the future there would be something there. Just cool stuff like that to sprinkle all throughout the entire game. There was even innovation in shops. You could bargain with the shopkeepers for a discount, but if you bargain too hard, they'll kick you out and raise the prices, so you gotta be careful. You could talk to them for tips and fourth wall breaking dialogue, and even take out a loan if you needed some cash right now. It's just such an incredible game that gets no love and innovated in ways that were just unheard of in 1987 when this game was released.